Hello, welcome to Coffee, Politics, and Religion, CPR, Conversations to Resuscitate America. And, and we're here with my good friend, Jeff Getting, who's the county prosecutor of Kalamazoo County.
Hi, Harold.
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you. Anyway, and the issues of crime and punishment are always difficult in any kind of society. And we're here to discuss these issues. And even though we're friends, we do have differences of opinions. But I really respect Jeff a great deal, and I'm glad you agreed to do this show with us.
Well, thank you for asking.
So in the beginning, Jeff, let's have you just describe a little bit about yourself and what brought you to this office.
Well, I've been the elected prosecuting attorney since 2012. I took office January 2013. I was reelected in 2016 to serve another term until 2020. Prosecutors, as you know, are elected officials, and we run every 4 years on the presidential ballot years. Before becoming the elected prosecutor, I had a solo practice. I was practicing law here in Kalamazoo County since 1998. Focusing on doing criminal defense and family law during that time. Mm-hmm. And before that, after law school, I had joined the Kalamazoo County Prosecutor's Office and worked here for 8 years as an assistant prosecuting attorney.
So what brought you to the law? Why did you decide to be a lawyer?
You know, I think I always had in the back of my mind that I was going to be a lawyer, even in high school. And then I attended undergrad at Western Michigan University. And really enjoyed the criminal justice classes and those professors and the sociology classes. And so ended up with a double major in sociology and criminal justice, which really led me directly to law school. You know, what else are you going to do at that point other than continue your education? In law school, you know, I was fascinated with a lot of different aspects of the law, but kept coming back to the idea that I wasn't really well suited, especially at that time, for, you know, working in an office 75 hours a week, taking directions from a senior associate who took directions from a junior partner who took directions from a senior partner, and was really looking for some way to be more involved, have more responsibility, and use some of the skills that I felt I had in the courtroom. The prosecutor's office here in Kalamazoo County checked all of those boxes. You know, it was an opportunity to have immediate responsibility, to move up quickly and have responsibility for bigger cases, and to use those skills that I already had naturally and build on those in the courtroom.
So it's a good fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, let's get to, which I imagine some of our disagreements, and talk about this book, which you're not a big...
That wasn't, you know, I thought we were going to have more just of a discussion time.
All right, let's talk about
becoming accusatory.
All right, we'll talk about the Big Bang Theory.
All right, let's get into criminal justice reform and
well, that's the point to the show, is to really get into the issues, and this is a book that you know, Locked In: The True Causes of Mass Incarceration, How to Achieve Real Reform, by John F. Pfaff, P-F-A-F-F. And we didn't know exactly how to pronounce his name, but I think it's Pfaff.
I don't know him personally.
Yeah, we don't pronounce the P. And you know this show, you know this book.
I know both the show and the book.
Is the show Locked In?
No, your show.
Oh, my show. Okay.
His book.
His book. Okay, my show, his book. Great. So anyway, and there's another book out there by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow.
Yeah. And
her thesis is that the reason that there's such a high number of people in prison is because of the drug war. And that's sort of conventional wisdom, and in fact he calls it part of the standard story. I mean, he talks about also private prisons and the length of prison time. He says, these contribute somewhat, but it's not the main thing that contributes to mass incarceration.
Who does he blame?
Well, and he's done a 5-year study, and I think he makes a really compelling case. And it's not a matter of blame, Jeff,
Okay.
but it's a matter of analysis. And one of the things he talks about is getting good data. And he says it's hard to get good data.
It's always hard to get good data.
You know, to determine, what crimes are. What kind of crime is considered a violent crime or something like that. I mean, that's really hard to determine. I mean, when you steal something, when's a felony? That's something he talks about. But he says, and he says one of the things that could help is having more police and more community police, but also a drug program. And we have a drug program here, right?
Yeah, we have several.
Judge Smay, right?
Yeah, Judge Smay started.
Wasn't one of the first?
Retired now, but
wasn't one of the first in the country?
yeah, one of the first 5 in the country.
Yeah. And that's something he says is even better than more police, but more police would help. But you know what I'm going to say. He says the main reason is prosecutors.
Right.
And, I have a lot of readings in here, but I'll just go right to the chase, to his, what he considers his solutions. Man behind the curtain, yeah.
Yeah, what he said was few people in the criminal justice system are as powerful or as central to prison growth as the prosecutor.
Do you agree with that?
I disagree with that.
You do? Well, let me read. You disagree. You don't think the prosecutor has a lot of power?
No, I think that the prosecutor has a tremendous amount of power. And,
Yeah.
and I think that he's right in some respects. It really is a very informative book, and,
Yeah.
and it's one that I enjoyed reading. And he's right he's right in some respects, but just as with the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander's books. I think that in order to really effectively address the issues of incarceration and criminal justice reform, you have to look at the system as a whole.
Right.
And quit looking at one piece or another and focusing on it piece by piece. I think we need to look at criminal justice and criminal justice reform in a broader sense. Because, when you read this book, it focuses on prosecutors and prosecutorial power and discretion and prosecutorial decision making, but it's looking at, it fails to account for differences between jurisdictions, differences between prosecutors, differences between states, and the problems that they face. You brought up one of the things that would be helpful is more police. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of counterintuitive, right? Most people would think more police, more arrests, more prosecution. And the reality is that what we've seen is a great decrease in the state of Michigan and in other jurisdictions in the number of police. The reality is that when you have a greater police presence, that presence just as a whole is a deterrent. Mm-hmm. You're allowing for police to work in a different way. You're allowing for more community policing efforts. You're allowing for police to become part of the communities that they're working in and to know the people in those communities rather than simply having the police as a response to a call for an emergency.
I think the really key to that is the time element. Mm-hmm. If police are rushed, they probably were more likely, simply because it's easier to make their arrests rather than spending time trying to quell the situation and that kind of thing. And it's generally what police do anyway. Well, that's something we should acknowledge, right? I mean, there are these cases that we see on the news, and they're really tragic, when police use deadly force, and it's really unfortunate. But that 95% or more police in their whole tenure of their careers never even draw their guns. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe it's more than 95%, right?
Less than 1% of arrests across this country involve any violence by police at
Right.
all, any use of force.
Right.
Less than 1%. And it's a fraction of that 1% where it's a use of force that results in
Right.
injury or serious injury or death. And so the reality is that we've become focused on the awful incidents
Right.
that the media focuses our attention on, and not on the reality of the work that's actually
I compare it
being
to,
done.
you know, like there are people that are afraid to fly. And do you know how many people died in like the last 4 or 5 years in airlines?
Not very many.
0. And yet people are afraid to fly. And the reason is that when there is a plane crash, not in this country, but, you know, someplace, it becomes really big news. And so these things, they become big news. And you don't see the 99% of the police doing their work, you know, everyday
Yep.
work and that kind of thing. But still there is, I mean, okay, but Jeff, do you agree though? There is a problem that we do have a high incarceration rate.
Oh, absolutely. We have a high incarceration rate, and there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, you know, when you look at what Michelle Alexander said in the new Jim Crow, and blaming the war on drugs on mass, or blaming mass incarceration on the war on drugs.
Right.
If you look at Michigan, and I'll keep talking about Michigan, and then I'll talk about
That's what you know.
Kalamazoo,
Right.
right? As opposed to the national statistics that are quoted in books like
Well,
the
one of the
Jim Crow
things,
or
let
Locke.
me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one of the things he points out there's 3,144 separate districts, namely counties in the country. And each one of those counties has a prosecutor. And those prosecutors handle their jobs very differently from
Right.
county to county. In fact, I remember reading in New York Times, there's this county in Indiana where they do this really high incarceration rate, way beyond, you know, and that's because of the choices that the prosecutor makes.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think what's important is that we trust the prosecutor to have due diligence and discretion and wisdom and that kind of thing. And I think that's because, you know, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to, I don't know, how do you change it anyway? I mean, you got to trust the person, basically.
Well, Michigan has 83 counties in it,
Right.
83 elected prosecuting attorneys, and all of us, myself and all of my colleagues have, you know, there's broad similarities in what we do, and
Right.
and there's broad differences in what we do. But we're each responsible to the people in each of our counties,
Right.
right? And when you look at a county like Kalamazoo County is a very much a 50-50 split between Republicans and Democrats. We have Republican elected officials countywide. We have Democratic elected officials countywide. This county is one of those that are sort of in the middle. If you compare that to other counties across the state, there are some counties that are far more liberal. There are some counties that are far more conservative than Kalamazoo. And the prosecutors in each of those different jurisdictions are responsible for policies and decision making that is, you know, consistent with their communities.
The culture, you mean?
Yeah, which
Yeah.
leads to, you know, some differences in the way we approach
Right.
things sometimes. But when we talk about incarceration, and we'll go back to what I was going to say,
Yeah.
the reality of incarceration and the drug laws, the reality of incarceration in the state of Michigan is that less than 8% of the people that are in Michigan's prisons, in a state prison, are there because of a conviction for a drug offense. We're not flooding Michigan's prisons with drug offenders.
He says as much.
I know he says as
Yeah,
much.
right.
He's right.
Yeah.
We're not. It's less than 8% in the state of Michigan.
Right.
The reality of incarceration across the state of Michigan is that we are not trending up. We, in fact, are trending down. Over the last decade, we've reduced the number of people in Michigan's prisons by about 20%. We went from over 50,000 people in prison to under 40,000 people in a decades worth of time. We've closed dozens of prisons across the
Right.
state of Michigan.
Like Jackson.
And so,
Yeah.
you know, when we read a book like Locked In and we
Yeah.
say we start with the premise that prosecutors are driving this huge increase in incarceration rates, well, in the state of Michigan, that's not true.
Okay.
In the state of Michigan, in fact, we have a prison commitment rate that's continuing to drop over the last 10 years. And yes, it had gone up, but now it's going down and it's declining sharply.
Okay, good. Well, we'll talk in our next segment more about this. He does acknowledge there is a decrease, but he's saying it's less than what you're saying about Michigan, but we'll get to that. So
Right.
we'll be right back.